Welcome back to World's News, where we present you the most important and funny news from the past week. This week's topics are a tsunami warning in Japan, an Australian court that overturned a teenager's landmark climate ruling, that Netflix finally did it, and the weekly update on the Russo-Ukrainian war. So I hope that you enjoy this week's news, and let's jump right into the video. Tsunami warning in Japan. I'm sure that you've all heard of Fukushima, right? Well, for the people that haven't, Fukushima is or more was a nuclear power plant in Japan, and I'm gonna do a quick history lecture here. Its full name was Fukushima Daini Power Plant, and it was in service for over 40 years until it was forced into early retirement by a tsunami following a very strong earthquake in that region. That tsunami was approximately 9 to 14 meters high, and you might wonder why this is such a vague number. But the simple reason for that is that the people couldn't come to an agreement over how high that tsunami actually was. But long story short, that gigantic wave caused the pumps cooling the reactors to fail, 3 of the 4 reactors melted down, and a nuclear disaster happened, which is by the way the worst scenario for the Russian-Ukrainian war as well. So around 15,000 people died because of this earthquake and its consequences like the tsunami, but only 1 death of nuclear radiation was confirmed. But why am I telling you this? So Japanese scientists announced that there was a 7.4 magnitude earthquake in the Pacific Ocean this Wednesday. That tsunami advisory was made for both Fukushima and Miyagi prefectures in eastern Japan, following the quake that had a preliminary epicenter depth of 60 kilometers or 37 miles according to the Japan Meteorological Agency. Later that day, the Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida said that 4 people had died and that the Japanese government would be on high alert for the possibility of further strong tremors over the next 2 to 3 days. And earlier that day, the Fire and Disaster Management Agency said that at least 94 people had been injured. But thanks to an early tsunami warning and modern technology, very few people died compared to the Fukushima incident, and hopefully the injured people will get well soon. Australian court overturns teenager's landmark climate ruling. Among other governments, the Australian government isn't too happy about sustainable energy sources as well. Well, at least the Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison isn't. And of course I'll give you proof for that. So, when he got elected Prime Minister of Australia back in 2018, his tendencies toward fossil fuels were well known, which could also be a reason why they voted for him back then. But after the idea of the climate change grew bigger and bigger and the Fridays for Future movement was started, most countries started investing in sustainable energy sources, but not Mr. Morrison. He brought a piece of coal to the Australian Parliament and presented it to his fellow members as if they were primary school students. "This is coal. Don't be afraid. Don't be scared. Won't hurt you," he said. And since then, he went on denying climate change being linked to the use of fossil fuels, and when his entire country was literally on fire, he was on vacation in Hawaii. So yeah, he's not really the best prime minister in recent times. But that isn't even my point, it's just to support this topic. So the Australian government has successfully appealed the court ruling that ordered the Federal Environment Minister to consider the impact of carbon emissions on children when approving new coal mining projects. So to get this straight, the Australian Federal Environment Minister doesn't have to consider the future of the Australian youth when ruling over their future. In my opinion, that's as stupid as it can get, because when her actions will have affected this planet enough to destroy it, she probably won't be around anymore to witness it. But guess who will still live here? Oh, that's right, the people whose opinion doesn't matter. I mean, if she at least would make good decisions, this wouldn't be that much of a problem. But as I told you, she even wants to approve new coal mining projects instead of investing in sustainable energy sources like solar energy from the outback. And I know that this would be way more expensive, and the idea where you get your energy from solar panels in the outback would need detailed planning and a cooling system that hasn't been invented yet. But I think that this is well worth the trouble, because I would rather live in a country which is in debt because it changed its entire energy system than not live at all because our planet became a huge oven. But that doesn't seem to be our decision. Well, I got a bit carried away, but you get my point, right? And Australia isn't the only country that is still approving new fossil fuel sources. I mean, the only reason why Nord Stream 2, a new gas pipeline, isn't used until now is the Russia-Ukrainian war. But we at least have to start aiming for a future in which our energy is generated eco-friendly. And that starts with us. But I can't really tell you what to do, because there are so many things that have to be done in order to achieve this goal. But the best thing to do is probably becoming the Federal Environment Minister and to change things. So good luck with that, I guess. Netflix finally did it. I feel like this was talked about for years, but apparently Netflix hadn't started this until now. I'm talking about consequences for people from different locations sharing their Netflix accounts. But Netflix won't block or even delete your accounts, because they want people to use Netflix, remember that. So they found a compromise that will have to work for both sides. So from now on, people sharing passwords between households will have to pay a bit more than you normally would. This scheme is being trialed in Chile, Costa Rica and Peru. So people sharing their accounts in Chile and Costa Rica will be charged $2.99 more per month, while people in Peru will be charged $2.19 more per month. So the costs for a Netflix account won't increase too much. But wouldn't it be funny if the people in these countries just completely stopped using Netflix? Because then Netflix would make way less money than they would with free account sharing, and they probably wouldn't pursue that idea any further. But since that wouldn't work, we will probably have to pay a bit more for sharing Netflix accounts soon. The Russo-Ukrainian War. This war will probably go on for weeks, if not months, but right now, the Russian troops don't seem to be able to take over Ukraine. The Russo-Ukrainian War has raged for almost an entire month, taking thousands of lives. A few of them were journalists from all over the world, and yes, the killing of journalists is a war crime and therefore forbidden. But it's still war, and war isn't that cool as well, so you can't really count on countries that invaded other countries not to commit war crimes. But that's not the point. 2 journalists killed in Ukraine were a 24-year-old Ukrainian journalist Alexandra Kuvshinova, who was killed in Kiev, and Pierre Zagrzewski, who was killed near Kiev as well. Both of them were killed by Russian soldiers, and now colleagues and many other people said goodbye to the both of them. Pierre Zagrzewski was a 55-year-old long-time war photojournalist and left behind his wife, but no kids, if my research is correct. Ukraine's Ministry of Defense later stated that the truth is the target. Apart from that, US President Joe Biden called the Russian President Vladimir Putin a war criminal, and the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky told the Russian troops to surrender and not to lose their lives for no good reason. So hopefully some Russian soldiers will actually stop fighting, and many have already done this and are now war captives. But Putin will probably not stop this war before Ukraine becomes Russian or Russia loses that war, which he's sure won't happen, but we'll see about that. These were the most important news from the past week. If you've got any suggestions on news that we missed out on, feel free to let us know in the comments. And now to this week's bonus fact. According to a recent survey, 7% of Americans believe chocolate milk comes from brown cows. That survey was conducted by the Innovation Center of US Dairy. Now do with that information what you want, but please question the things that you think or read on the internet. Oh, and by the way, the sources for this video can be found in the description.